Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gill and I'm the owner of Texas Senior Living Locators in Austin, Texas. In this video, we're going to talk about independent retirement living communities. People unfamiliar with the senior living industry often think intuitively that independent living means a house or an ordinary apartment building. The name was coined, however, to contrast with assisted living, as independent living has no caregivers hired or managed by the building. Its residents are independent of caregivers, and building management is independent of regulators. But the situation has evolved somewhat. Let's talk about how independent living fits into the broader senior living industry. Both independent living and assisted living are apartment buildings surrounding a centralized dining room with a meal plan. Both have an activities director and transportation to doctors' offices and grocery stores. But the distinguishing difference is that assisted living communities are licensed healthcare facilities and have caregiving services hired and directed by the community. Independent living communities are not allowed to provide any caregiving services because they are not licensed. However, most independent living communities have rented out an office to an outside caregiving agency who does have a license to provide residents with help with activities of daily living. In the Austin, Texas area, those outside caregiving agencies have names like Halcyon Home, Comfort Care, Brookdale Personal Services, and Senior Minded Home Care. In combination with the outside agency, an independent living building can perform probably 80% of the services an assisted living can do. But there are a couple of critical differences as well. First, in independent living, the services provided must be schedulable. Spontaneous changes to the schedule are very difficult in an independent living setting, unlike an assisted living setting. Second, you are now dealing with two different organizations, which makes communication and coordination more difficult. For example, sometimes it might be the dining room staff that notices something is off with a resident. This information doesn't always filter over to the caregiving agency, and signals can get missed. Third, and surprisingly, it is sometimes an advantage for independent living buildings to not be regulated. For example, I know of a quadriplegic resident who is barred by regulation from living in an assisted living because they are deemed bedbound. Independent living communities are governed by fair housing laws and aren't allowed to even ask about disabilities. So long as the outside agency can meet that resident's needs, they are free to stay. Generally, independent living buildings have a nicer amenities in comparison to assisted living. In independent living, there are almost always full kitchens, including stoves, and the apartments are bigger. Two-bedroom apartments are much more common in independent living. Sometimes there are pools and movie theaters, and occasionally washer-dryers in the apartments themselves. In assisted living buildings, the kitchenettes are generally only include a small refrigerator, sink, and microwave, and common areas are less enticing. Independent living is cheaper than assisted living. In Austin, the cheapest independent living apartments usually are just at or under $2,000 per month, depending on sales incentives. This price includes all utilities, 3 meals a day, an activities schedule, and limited transportation services. This price does not include the services of the outside caregiving agency. One-bedroom apartments in independent living in Austin run $2,500 to $3,500 per month, with the most expensive going for over $5,000 per month. Two-bedroom apartments run $3,200 to $4,500 per month, with the most expensive two-bedroom apartment being over $7,000 a month. Now, nothing is cheap in the senior living industry, but independent living can be $1,000 to $2,000 less expensive than assisted living. This price savings can buy a lot of outside caregiving services. Therefore, from a price perspective, independent living can be a more affordable alternative to assisted living. But this can be a false savings if the resident can't live safely. So you must remember the requirement for care to be schedulable in independent living. This is particularly true if a resident is developing dementia, because their care needs and behaviors may make them unsuitable for such an unsupervised environment. In Austin, we have 31 independent living communities, and they have, on average, about 144 apartments each, almost twice the size of a large assisted living community. I often get asked about the pricing services for outside caregiving agencies. This is hard to characterize because every outside caregiving agency has a different pricing scheme. For example, some caregiving agencies will charge a $10 fee for every pass of medication, which is $30 a day if you have 3 medication management visits, or $900 a month. Others will charge a base price of $450 per month for up to 3 passes a day. Often a caregiving agency will break up the visitation charge into 15-minute increments, but sometimes they will charge by the task. A load of laundry, for example, may be $12 fixed price in some places, or may be combined into an hourly charge elsewhere. But compared to the 4-hour minimum charge for a visit to someone's home, the flexibility and price of outside caregiving agencies is generally a good deal. I will also note that licensed home health agencies, which are different from caregiving agencies, come into independent living communities and provide physical and occupational therapies, as well as short-term nursing services. Even hospice can come into independent living buildings, though that is less common than in assisted living or memory care settings. Finally, a note on the health of independent living residents in comparison to assisted living residents. One reason for many people to prefer independent living is because the overall cognitive health of its residents is better, and therefore there are more candidates for friends and socialization. Of course, there are people in independent living with cognitive challenges, and I would estimate this number to be around 15 to 25% of the total. Some residents have stayed there long enough that the dementia developed after they got there, and they may simply have a mild case of the forgetfuls. In other cases, new residents and their families are not yet able to recognize the beginnings of memory loss. Nevertheless, the amount of cognitive decline is substantially less than in an assisted living, where it afflicts probably 50 to 75% of the residents in the building. There are plenty of residents with walkers in independent living, so don't think that having a walker means you must go to an assisted living. But severe mobility problems are a good reason to go to assisted living, because people who are severe fall risks generally don't get enough oversight in an independent living setting. I hope this introduction to the independent living segment of the senior living industry has been helpful. My name is Michael Gill of Texas Senior Living Locators, and if you need help finding an appropriate solution in an assisted living, memory care, or independent retirement living setting in the Austin area, please give me a call at 512-630-7133. Thank you and good day.